I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold, staring at the back door like I expected it to open on its own. It had started 2 nights before. I'd been in bed around 11 when I heard something outside. Not loud, not like someone breaking in, more like the sound of careful feet on gravel. Deliberate. The kind of sound you convince yourself is a raccoon because the alternative is worse. I let it go. Told myself I was 63 years old and jumpy, which was probably true. My wife had passed 4 years earlier, and I'd been alone in that house ever since. You get used to interpreting sounds differently when you live alone. The house settles. The wind moves things. You learn to talk yourself down. But then the next morning, I walked out to check my security camera. A decent Lorex unit I'd mounted on the back fence post 2 summers ago, and the little indicator light was off. The whole unit had been powered down. Not unplugged, not knocked over, powered down, which meant someone had held the reset button for 5 seconds on the back of the unit. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I stood there in the yard in my bathrobe for a long time. I'd spent 31 years as an auditor for a regional insurance company in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm not a paranoid man. I like evidence. I like facts. I don't jump to conclusions, and I've always been proud of that. But the facts in front of me were this. Something had been on my property 2 nights ago, and whoever or whatever it was knew how to disable a security camera. I took the unit down from the fence post and brought it inside. The SD card was still in the slot, and I thought maybe there was still something recoverable on it, some fragment of footage from before the shutdown. But when I tried to access it on my laptop, the card reader couldn't recognize the format. Either it had been wiped or the file system was corrupted. That's when I decided to take it somewhere. There's a small electronics repair shop about 4 miles from my house, on the same strip as a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese sandwich place my son used to love. The shop is run by a man named Al, who's been there as long as I can remember. Fixes phones, pulls data off old hard drives, that kind of thing. I brought the camera in on a Tuesday morning. Al plugged it into his system, ran a diagnostic, and got quiet. Not working quietly quiet. Something is wrong, quiet. He leaned toward the screen, and then he turned around and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on a man's face in a long time. "Sir," he said, "I think you need to leave, right now, and don't go home." I asked him what he meant. He turned the monitor toward me. There was footage on the card, after all. A fragment that his recovery software had pulled from a partially overwritten sector. It was time-stamped 11:47 p.m., 2 nights earlier. The camera faced the backyard. The motion sensor had triggered, and on the screen, in the gray-green of night vision, I could see a figure standing at my back door with a key. Not trying to pick the lock, not breaking glass, using a key. He was inside for 11 minutes. Then he left the same way he came in. I recognized the jacket. I recognized the way he held his shoulders, the way he tilted his head slightly to the right when he was concentrating on something. It was my son-in-law. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without context. My daughter, she's 36, lives about 25 minutes from me, has been married to him for 8 years. I won't say I never liked him. I'll say it more carefully than that. I never fully trusted him, and I didn't know why for a long time. He's a pleasant man in social situations, talks well, dresses well, remembers birthdays, but there was always something slightly off in his explanations of things. Slight. Just enough to notice, but not enough to name. He works in commercial real estate. Or he did. About 14 months ago, my daughter told me his company had hit a rough patch, and they were dealing with some financial stress. I said I understood, and I meant it. The market had been rough for a lot of people. She didn't ask for anything at that point. I didn't offer. That was the end of the conversation. Then, 3 months after that, she came to me with a request. She said they needed a loan. $40,000. She said it was to cover a gap in their mortgage payments, something about a balloon payment that had come due faster than expected. She was calm when she asked, which worried me more than tears would have. My daughter doesn't panic easily. She gets very calm and very direct when she's frightened. I gave them the money. I wrote a check the same week. I told her it wasn't a loan, it was a gift. and I didn't want them stressed about paying it back. She cried then. Her husband shook my hand at the door and thanked me, and said I was the best father-in-law any man could ask for. 4 months later, there was another conversation. This one about power of attorney. My daughter said that she and her husband had been talking, and they were worried about me. I was getting older. I lived alone. What if something happened? She said it might give them peace of mind if I signed a durable power of attorney naming her as my agent. She had a form already printed out. She explained it carefully, said it would only be used if I was incapacitated, that it was just a precaution, that she loved me and didn't want to think about me being in a situation where no one could help. I signed it. I'm not proud of that, but I want to be honest about it because I think a lot of people in my position do the same thing. When someone you love sits across from you with a printed form and concern in their eyes, you don't think about fraud. You think about being 63 and alone and not wanting to be a burden. I signed it, and I didn't think about it again until I was standing in Al's shop, looking at my son-in-law's face on a grainy night vision screen. I drove to a diner instead of going home. I ordered eggs I didn't eat, and I sat in a corner booth and the first thing I thought was, maybe there's an innocent explanation. He has a key because my daughter has a key. I'd given her one years ago for emergencies. Maybe she gave him a copy. Maybe something came up and they needed to check on the house and they didn't want to wake me and it was all completely fine. I sat with that for about 4 minutes. Then I thought about the camera being reset. No innocent person resets a security camera. You don't do that by accident. You don't do that if you have nothing to hide. You do that when you know the camera is there and you don't want to be seen. I called my bank from the diner. I have my accounts with a regional credit union, First Carolina Federal, where I've banked since 1989. I asked the woman on the phone if there had been any requests on my account in the past 60 days. Any beneficiary changes, any inquiries, any attempted access. She put me on hold for a few minutes. When she came back, her voice had shifted. She said there had been an in-person inquiry 6 weeks ago. Someone had come into the branch and asked about the process for updating the beneficiary on my accounts. They had presented identification and claimed to be acting under a power of attorney arrangement. I asked who. She said she couldn't tell me over the phone, but she could tell me that no changes had been completed. The branch manager had flagged the inquiry and sent it to their fraud review team because the person requesting the change hadn't brought the actual POA documentation, just a photocopy, and their policy required originals. Mr. Whitfield, she said, I'd recommend you come in as soon as possible. I was there within the hour. The branch manager was a woman named Mrs. Okafor, and she was the clearest, most direct person I spoke to that entire week. She laid it out without softening it. Someone had come in, a man, matching the description I was already forming in my head, and attempted to begin the process of changing the primary beneficiary on my savings account in my IRA. He had a photocopy of the power of attorney document my daughter had me sign. He said my daughter was unavailable but had authorized him to act on her behalf. He was turned away because of the documentation issue. But Mrs. Okafor told me that had he brought originals, the change would likely have been processed. What was he trying to change the beneficiary to? I asked. She showed me the inquiry notes. He'd wanted to name a limited liability company as beneficiary on both accounts, an LLC I had never heard of. I wrote the name down on a napkin. I drove home. I changed the locks. I want to say that clearly because I know it's the first thing people would ask. I called a locksmith from the diner, and he met me at my house at 2 in the afternoon, and I stood there while he changed every exterior lock, and I had 2 new deadbolts installed on the back door. I kept 1 key. That was it. Then I sat down at my desk, and I looked up that LLC name. It had been registered in Delaware, common for these things. Delaware has loose formation requirements, 14 months ago, which is right around when my daughter first told me about their financial troubles. The registered agent was a name I didn't recognize, but the mailing address on the filing was a mailbox service in Charlotte, and when I cross-referenced the address with property records, one of the names that came up in an associated filing was his. Not directly, one step removed. His name on a related document, linked to a holding company, linked to the LLC. It took me 2 hours to trace it, and I'd spent 3 decades following paper trails for a living. I called my daughter. I want to tell you I confronted her. I want to tell you I laid it all out and demanded answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I told her I was calling to check in, that I'd had some work done on the house, that everything was fine. She said her husband was out of town for the week. She sounded normal, tired the way she always sounds on Tuesday evenings. I said I loved her and I'd talk to her soon, and I hung up. Then I called an attorney. His name is Mr. Beaumont. He's a trusts and estates attorney I'd worked with years earlier when my wife and I wrote our original wills. I hadn't spoken to him in several years, but he remembered me immediately. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I was finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "The first thing we need to do is revoke that power of attorney. Today, if possible." We filed the revocation the next morning. North Carolina allows you to revoke a durable POA in writing with notarization, and Mr. Beaumont had it done by 11 o'clock. He also advised me to notify the credit union in writing, which Mrs. Okafor helped me draft that same afternoon. Then Mr. Beaumont said something that changed my understanding of the situation. He said the LLC structure and the beneficiary inquiry suggested this wasn't an impulsive act. This was planned, possibly over a year in advance. He said that in his experience, when a family member structures something this carefully, there's usually more than one angle of attack. He asked me, had anything else changed recently? Any mail that seemed off? Any other accounts I might have mentioned to my daughter or her husband? I thought about it, and then I remembered a conversation from about 8 months ago at my daughter's kitchen table after Sunday dinner. Her husband had asked about my pension, how it was structured, who the survivor benefits went to, whether I'd ever thought about restructuring it for tax purposes. I told him the basics. I thought it was just conversation. Mr. Beaumont said, "I'd contact your pension administrator first thing tomorrow." I did, and yes, there had been a phone inquiry about my pension 3 months ago. Someone calling on my behalf. The pension office had sent a verification letter to my address, which I apparently never received, or which had been intercepted. They had not made any changes because their policy required a physical signature on file, but the inquiry was documented. Someone had been working through my financial life methodically, account by account. The part that hit me hardest wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that. I'm not a wealthy man, but I have enough. I've been careful my whole life. What hit me hardest was the calculation of it. The $40,000. The concern about me living alone. The power of attorney conversation. All of it arranged. In sequence over more than a year. While I sat across from this man at holiday dinners and thanked him for the wine he brought, I thought about my wife. She died of pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, 6 weeks after diagnosis. He had been at the hospital. He'd held my daughter's hand. He'd spoken at the small service we held at the house afterward. I spent one evening with that, just one, and then I put it away. You have to. You can't function if you hold all of it at once. What I focused on instead was what to do next. Mr. Beaumont advised me not to confront my son-in-law directly. He said we needed to document everything first. He connected me with a private investigator, a retired sheriff's deputy named Mr. Tanner, who spent 3 weeks building a file, the LLC filings, the bank inquiry, the pension call, the camera footage that Al had helped me preserve on a clean drive, and additional records Mr. Tanner pulled through proper legal channels. I spent those 3 weeks acting normal. My son-in-law came back from his trip. I had dinner at my daughter's house on a Sunday. I sat across from him and ate brisket and told him about a documentary I'd watched about the space program. He refilled my water glass. I thanked him. I am not proud of how easy that was. When the file was complete, Mr. Beaumont arranged a meeting. Not at my house, not at their house. At his office, on a Thursday at 10 in the morning. He sent a certified letter to my daughter, asking her to come in regarding my estate documents. Nothing alarming, just standard language about reviewing and updating my will. She came alone. Her husband was supposed to join them but was running late. He arrived 20 minutes in. By then, my daughter already knew. Mr. Beaumont had laid out the documentation in front of her, everything, and she had sat there for a long time not saying anything. When her husband walked through the door, she was still sitting in the same position. She looked at him the way people look at someone when they are trying to find the version of that person they thought they knew and can't. He tried to explain. I sat quietly and let him talk. He talked for a long time. The explanations shifted several times. It was just research. It was to protect the family, he was going to tell me. He never actually changed anything. That last part was technically true, which he seemed to think mattered. Mr. Beaumont had already sent the file to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's office the morning before. I told my son-in-law that at the end of his explanation, he went very still. I looked at my daughter then. She had her hands flat on the conference table and she was looking at them. I wanted to say something to her that would help, but I didn't have words for it. I've been a father her entire life, and that was the first time I couldn't find anything to say. I said, "I love you. That doesn't change." She nodded. She didn't look up. Her husband was charged with attempted financial elder abuse, identity fraud, and unauthorized use of power of attorney. Those are serious charges in North Carolina. The DA's office told Mr. Beaumont they had a strong case given the documentation and the multiple financial institutions involved. My daughter filed for divorce 6 weeks after that meeting. She called me one evening, about 2 months after everything came out, and she said she hadn't known. She said she'd been aware they were struggling financially, but she hadn't known what he was doing. She said she felt stupid, which I told her was wrong. That people who calculate things like this spend a lot of energy making sure the people closest to them don't know. That's the whole architecture of it. I don't know if she fully believes me. I don't know if she believes herself. That's going to take time and probably someone more qualified than me to help her work through. What I do know is this. I went back to Mrs. O'Kofer at First Carolina Federal and updated my beneficiary designations directly. My daughter's name, officially, with the proper documentation, witnessed and notarized. I updated my will and removed the POA entirely, replacing it with a limited healthcare directive only, which Mr. Beaumont said was sufficient for my actual needs. I put the $40,000 out of my mind. It's gone. She needed it at the time, and I gave it freely. I'm not going to let the circumstances of how it was used change the fact that it came from the right place. What I haven't been able to let go of, not fully, is the camera, not the footage on it. I've made my peace with that. I mean the moment when Al turned that screen toward me and I saw my son-in-law standing at my back door in the dark using a key that wasn't his. I keep thinking about what he thought he was looking at when he looked at my house. At me. At 63 years old, living alone, a widower with savings and a pension, no one watching, I wonder if he looked at all of that and saw someone who wouldn't notice, or someone who wouldn't fight back, or just someone whose time was winding down and whose things might as well start moving toward somewhere useful. I want him to know that I noticed. I want him to know that I know exactly what I'm worth and exactly who I am, and that I have spent 63 years building a life that is mine, and it will be mine until the last day of it. And on that day, I will decide where it goes. He didn't take anything from me. He tried and he failed, and he will answer for it. And my daughter, she will be okay. I know that the way I know my own name. She's her mother's daughter. She finds her footing. It takes time, but she finds it. I'm still in that house. I put a new camera on the back fence post, better than the last one, with cloud backup so no one can wipe it by pressing a button. The yard looks the same. The coffee still goes cold when I sit too long at the kitchen table. But I sleep fine now. I sleep just fine. It is a moment I keep coming back to. Not the footage on Al's screen. Not the conversation in Mr. Beaumont's office. The moment I sat in that diner booth with eggs going cold in front of me, trying to find the innocent explanation, trying to give someone the benefit of the doubt they had never earned. I think that instinct, the one that reaches for the kindest version of events, is not a weakness. I want to say that clearly because I spent a long time after all of this wondering if I'd been naive, if I'd been foolish, if I'd handed over trust too easily. But being willing to believe the best of people is not the mistake. The mistake is staying there after the evidence tells you otherwise. The mistake is letting decency become a place where someone else hides. What protected me in the end wasn't anger, it wasn't suspicion. It was something quieter than both of those things. It was 31 years of following paper trails and knowing that the story a document tells does not lie, even when people do. When I found that LLC registered 14 months before any of this came to a head, I understood that I was looking at a plan, not a moment of desperation. And understanding that changed everything. It meant I didn't react. I documented. I verified. I called Mr. Beaumont before I called my daughter. That discipline, choosing precision over emotion when the stakes are highest, is what kept me from making moves that could have cost me the case before it started. I've been thinking about what I want my daughter to take from this when she's ready to talk about it that way. Not now. She's still in the part where the ground doesn't feel solid yet. But eventually, what I want her to understand is that loving someone is not the same as seeing them clearly. She loved him. That was real. And that love was used against her as methodically as it was used against me. The cruelty in that is not something she caused by feeling it. It is something he chose to exploit. There is a difference, and it matters. What I carry forward is this: you can be open-hearted and still be awake. You can trust people and still read documents carefully. You can love your family and still keep your own financial life in your own hands. These things are not in conflict. The version of care that asks you to give up your own agency is not care. It is control dressed in familiar clothing, and it counts on you not knowing the difference. I updated my accounts. I revoked the paperwork. I changed the locks and installed a better camera. Those are practical things. But the thing I'm most deliberate about now is simpler than any of that. I pay attention, not with suspicion, with attention. Not with suspicion, with attention. There is a difference. Suspicion looks for enemies. Attention just sees clearly. I'm 63 years old. I built what I have slowly, over decades, with work and patience, and not a small amount of sacrifice. Nobody gets to decide what happens to it except me, not because I'm rigid, not because I don't trust anyone, but because I earned that right one day at a time. And I intend to honor that by staying clear-eyed about it until the very last day. That's not bitterness. That's just knowing who you are.